Hello, we're back with a part 2 of our week 1 video discussion, asynchronous lecture for comma 4413, communication and cultural change. We're talking about all things television, but we've got some strategic readings pushing us in a singular direction, and that's what this is all about. It's having a place with which we can launch deep conversations and gain more understandings about not only the authors and their perspectives that we're working with, but also these mass mediums of communication. Handling some questions from Kimberly, and wow, did she drop a bushel on us in week 1. It's excellent work here. And commenting on the introduction to an owner's manual for television, the Thompson and Mattel introduction. We wanted to give you guys a sneak peek of this thing in week 1 and potentially kind of whet your appetite as a resource to invest in for the future. How helpful are the critics' opinions? They are just that, opinions, but how much of an effect do they have on consumers? All right, interesting question. I think this is a great side discussion to have. There are they can have a great effect. Critics help shape public opinion, right? They do this for us, this service, especially back when you think about a society as a literate society, as a reading society. And while research suggests we're reading less and less, or at least we're reading more, but we're reading fewer, longer works. One of the benefits of criticism is, a critical review, a review of a media review, a recap is relatively short. And so it's possibly digestible and something we're able to take in. This is one of the reasons a website or an app like Rotten Tomatoes is so functional. You can get these Spitfire takes from critics to help you gauge where you're going to put your consumer power. So absolutely they shape public opinion. And that's significant. At the same time, not everything that reaches critical consensus in one way or the other resonates with audiences the same way. And there have been plenty of times, and let's take the history of film, for example, maybe even television, where critics just didn't line up to appreciate something, right? They kind of send it on its way, would be a nice way of saying that, only for the text to reveal over time to be, in essence, ahead of its time, right? Something audiences resonate with later, at a later point in time. And that's actually common in the history of genre storytelling, right? Just behind me on the bookshelf, I think of the example of Moby Dick, right? One of the all-time literary classics, at least in Western culture. And that Moby Dick, not a hit. This was not, it was like the reverse of Avatar, right? Do you remember this movie, Avatar? Came out in 2009, James Cameron, all that, the blue alien things. Avatar was an enormous hit, and ridiculous success. His follow-up to Titanic, the #1 movie of all time, right? Until Avatar comes along. This guy. But Avatar, everyone's going out to see it. It's selling out theaters. Who does that anymore? And yet, like 3 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, we're all looking around like, wait a minute, did we all like that? Right? It kind of doesn't have the staying power. Whereas Moby Dick, not a hit at the time, but over time became that sort of voice of a generation work that just resonated and started to take on more meaning and interpretation over time. So critics don't always shape public opinion, but they can, and I think sometimes they're also some of the shills or voices for the industry, right? So they're out there just trying to create promotion. You think about all these kind of schlocky, campy access shows, right, that air on TV, that are syndicated. These are shows that are essentially produced and funded by the studios to get more word out, to get the buzz going. So, take it that way, if you will. Let's jump over and let's jump down to some commentary on the Television American Culture book by Jason Mittell, looking at just the introduction right now, week one. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me jump ahead to the question so we can just keep moving. On chapter 5, or rather chapter 5 on page 177, I am amazed and fascinated, writes Kimberly, by all that goes on in the staging process for one TV show. It is no wonder it takes so long and costs so much. To which the following questions emerge. Who plans and decides all these details? And here's just a short list of some of the leaders that help make these decisions. All right, you have, of course, we're thinking about staging process, production designers, right? Production designers that are crafting and creating these sets both in advance, but ways to enhance and making them up. You have set managers, people that making sure things look the way they're supposed to look. There's something called not a quality control person, but a continuity advisor, right? That their job is supposed to make sure, okay, this cup is facing the same direction in each take, right? That these props don't get moved around too much. You have lighting engineers. You have sound grip. All right. You think about someone like with the boom mic operating, so they can pick up the live performers' voices, especially for something like live sitcom tapings, that kind of thing. You have the DP, right? The director of photography, whose passion, whose role in life is making sure that the lens is focused in the right kind of way, that's going to capture the essence of the performers in the right way. Nothing's going to be out of focus that shouldn't be. And they tend to have a deep focus lens a lot on television so that you can see all the details. Whereas you think about film, like sometimes you have that close-up or extreme close-up of characters and the background is maybe out of focus. And, that's intentional. That's giving us an intimate moment, whereas television is often providing a broader look at quote-unquote reality. So all of these are coordinated by the director, these positions, and that's why television, film, seen as collaborative mediums. And television especially isn't traditionally recognized as a director's medium the way that film has been for many decades at least. We're not saying it is, but it has been seen that way by many. If it really is the producer, how many producers are on one show? Okay, I see. I think I understand what's going on here. Many people simply take a credit, like a producer's credit at the end. Sometimes, especially this title, executive producer, that could be anybody, right? So you'll often see maybe the bigger someone becomes, like a celebrity or a star or famous for something, they'll start to take on producer creds. And that's a normal part of the process of saying, we're giving you more credit because you've clearly played this bigger role as time went on. You have those financial producers, basically, at the end of the day, and hopefully they're far away, not meddling too much. And then you have the kind of producers that would be maybe on set, making sure that the production's going according to schedule, that everyone's doing their job, that we're not being wasteful, right? Think about, let's cross back over to film, those excessive reshoots, or when a film goes long, like over past its production schedule. A producer's role is making sure that everything stays on track, along with the director. But that's why you hear of tensions between directors and producers. On page 180, when designing a set for a long-running TV show such as Friends, question, where do they keep these sets so they're not disturbed and so that nothing is moved when they are not filming? And they have a lot of sitcoms, particularly, are built and shot on sound stages. These giant, you see those giant warehouses, sometimes in pictures of Hollywood or whatever, and these sets exist within these warehouses, and they're often built right next to one another for efficiency, but also so that the typical sitcom has a traditionally 3 primary sets, right? Set A, set B, set C. You can think about it in Friends concept. It would be let's say set A is Rachel's apartment. Set B would be like, the men's apartment, and then set C would be the Central Park Cafe where they meet. And all three of these sets would be right next to each other, and they would film. And so this way they're filming in front of the same audience. And the audience can see each of these sets, and they're also doing minimalist shifts to all the kind of like the camera setup stuff. So then we see how it's more streamlined. It's about efficiency, right? It's about being able to achieve that kind of film it in a timely manner. Even think about something like SNL, Saturday Night Live. This is something different where they're breaking down and building up their sets in between commercial breaks. That's why the show takes so many commercial breaks, right? They have to redress the cast. They have to build back up the sets. They do actually have it. It's almost a 360 style of set. And a couple of times in the last couple of years, they broke the fourth wall, and I'm always adding dimensions to things, but and kind of giving us that look, right? Peel back and show us what it's like for it to break down. And those sets are typically flat. They're meant to be kind of reused, repurposed, and so on. Whereas maybe sitcom sets, they're going to stay up even in the off season because studios are giving tours all the time, and tourists want to see that, and they want to do the walk-bys. So if a show is still on the air, it's likely that they keep the sets going, especially among the more profitable ones. Some could be taken down, but some sets, right? Some sets get sunset, right? They'll take them down and maybe auction off or repurpose those props. All right. You asked 3 questions and I answered all 3 of them in my commentary just now. Let's tackle a question from Amber. Why is it so important to have the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, control television? Is the control just for the regular broadcast channels or for the cable channels? It isn't as important today as I stressed already in our commentary today. The real concern was in the mid 20th century, and we're coming out of wartime, and there are these wartime conditions, right? Nationally, concerns. We're talking about the start of the Cold War, right? Nuclear tensions, real and realistic fear of the other, nuclear annihilation, and so on. And so there is a very tight lid on the kinds of things that could be shared over public airways, and even private airways were kind of viewed as public airways that could be interrupted for federal purposes, right? In the event of emergency. And there was a real need to unify the country in that period, kind of ward off alternative ideology, so to speak. And so this is where the FCC was really thriving in certain roles. But today, I mean, they probably police the broadcast networks, right? Your big 4 or 5. They're going to have a little bit more of a tighter control on what their content looks and sounds like. But cables plays a little looser. I guess they're less afraid of the fines as well. They take it almost in any direction that they want to these days, with a couple of exceptions, but not many. Whereas then the broadcast networks are still, they toggle a fine line, right? I don't want to act like they're ultra conservative by any means. I think that would be false. So good question, great question so far in week 1. We'll do one more segment and we'll wrap things up. Sit tight.